program. As you settle in and get ready for the start of today's webinar, let me give you a brief introduction to TUG, the usergroup.org, for both our current members and for those of you who represent organizations that have not yet joined our online community of Infor distribution software users. Whoops. We've all heard the phrase, knowledge is power, and I can say with confidence after today's presentation, you'll be waking up tomorrow with a little more of both, but today is only one presentation. TUG webinars, online forums, and member events facilitate the timely exchange of ideas and information to help you work smarter and with more confidence, and that's a wonderful combination. If you're not already a member, it pays to get even more. If you're already a current member, it pays to get even more involved. And if you're not, please visit our website to discover why 2,300 heads are better than one to help you be the best at what you do. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Mel Church. Mel, if you want to go ahead and take it away, I'm going to let you introduce the panelists today.
Thank you, Gloria. So like she mentioned, I'm Mel Church, the ERP administrator at S&C Electric, as well as the WebUI CSD network group leader at TUG. And I've been given the privilege to host this wonderful panel today. I would like to start off with a brief overview of the challenges our company is facing that inspired me to ask for this panel discussion. As many of us have migrated from custom mods and GUI to extensibility in WebUI CSD, there's been a learning curve, not only on how to create extensions, but how to manage them in a feasible way where we're able to seamlessly upgrade WebUI without major extension review. So the personal reason I called for this webinar is because our company is using WebUI on-prem and moving to the cloud like many of you are. And we're struggling to get to the point where we can take those monthly upgrades with confidence that our extensions aren't going to break anything major. Some of it has to do with documentation. Some of it has to do with testing tools. But a lot of it has to do with having a clear-cut set of best practices to ensure nothing is missed during our upgrades. So after talking to other TUG members, we found that we're definitely not facing these challenges alone. So here today to discuss solutions to these challenges is our incredibly talented and knowledgeable panel of presenters. Our presenters today are Chris Weaver from Infor, David Garcia from First Supply, Jeffrey Brown from Infor, and Jim Hatch from Tridex, and each will be giving a short presentation. We're also delighted to have Catherine Hen and Brandon Watson on the call for support and to help answer any questions raised. We'll be opening up for questions after each short presentation, so as soon as you think of a question, please put it into your question bar and we can address it as soon as possible. So without further delay, I'd like to pass the torch over to our first presenter, the one and the only, Chris Weaver, the VP of Software Development at Infor.
The one and only. Thanks, Mel. Let's see here, share my screen. So if you've ever seen anything that I've done in the past, I like to just jump right in and live a trial by fire and demo directly from a dev environment. So Mel asked me to cover feature functionality for extensibility that's been added over about the past year. And we take requests for extension capabilities to heart. So put ERSs in for functionality, not for the extension itself, but to give you the ability to create the extension. And as I walk through here, some of these examples kind of highlight some things that have come through from customer requests for extending the capabilities of extensibility. So without further ado, we're looking at the extension admin screen, much like the personalization screen where we have the admin screen there as well, but we're going to focus on extensions themselves because what this really does is, as we've said before, kind of takes the rubber rails off of the personalizations. With extensions, you really have the power to bend the UI to your will with extensions and the capabilities that come along with that. But as I think Gloria said, knowledge is power. Power brings chaos at the same time. So with the power of extensibility, you can break things. So the issues that Mel brought up are very valid, and they're not just hers. They are a lot of members in the group that run into these issues. So as I go through this, think about how these things can affect your extensibility and your upgrade paths or update paths in the future. I do want to show just a very few highlights or to touch on what we have. If you're familiar with the Extensibility admin tool, I just drilled down into a system view extension. So we do have the different types. This is just a screen extension view. Come all the way down to the bottom. You'll now notice that we've added a revision viewer, a grid for all of the revisions. Previously, we just had the revision number that corresponds with this. But as we make changes now, it doesn't just increment this number, but it also adds to the grid down below. And let me pick one that has more than one revision. Let's sort by revision number. Here we go. We got one with 3. So this one again is an extended view. This time I'm going to come down to the bottom, and now I see that I have 3 revisions. I can drill into each one of these, but if I want to look at the differences between the two, historically I've had to have downloaded each one of these that I wanted to diff and then use a tool, Notepad++ or whatnot, to show my differences. Now, however, we've added ability so we can select multiples. In this case, I'm going to select number 3 and number 2, and I'm going to say compare with, and here I'm going to compare with each other. Do notice we have other options. So even if I have something on my clipboard, I can compare a revision with something that's on my clipboard. Or if I just have this one selected, I can compare it with the previous revision or the latest revision. In this case, 3 is, so I would not necessarily get a diff. But I want to show the difference between these two. And now we see all of the changes. So the left-hand side is revision number 2, the right-hand side is revision number 3. So my newest is going to be on the right. And what's been added is going to be in green. And what's been removed is going to be in, I'll call that pink. We've only added things on this side, which is why I see my add changes here, but we did drop these 2 fields. So it's going to show me that these were removed, and then these are what's added. From there, we can tab through. Notice at the top here it says difference 2 of 6, and it's got my little pointer here. It's showing me that this new segment has been added in this position. So again, I can just kind of step through these really quick. So this was added, I believe, at the end of 2019, if memory serves. Again, I'm demoing from 20.8, which will be released in August, but being in dev, I kind of get access to some early releases. For other things that have been added and changed, so if I go to new, now we have a style sheet editor. So I call it an editor. It's not so much that, it's still the box where we can add the style sheets, but I don't have to create the JavaScript to inject the style sheets anymore. Anything that I put here for a global style sheet change, or if I want to target specific types of fields, I can add as a style sheet entry. There's been some use cases where people want to enhance the look of a setup of a inquiry screen. So for example, ARIC, just a quick use case here. Let's say that the name, the titles don't jump out at me enough. I want to be able to draw a line under each one of those. Previously, you would have to go in and change styling on each and every one of those. Now I can add a global entry, just call it underline, for example. And this is going to be incorrect syntax because I actually have to know what tag, either the ID or some identifying tag of that title. But I can just, add my my fake tag dot underline dot open, and then add the underline syntax that goes along with that. So it does allow you to override even the existing base style sheets that comes along with Cloud Suite distribution. Also, something that we added recently, and I think this is just very cool, is the ability to run in debug mode. So if you're doing development with extensions and you want to do debugging, there's really only one way to do it, to step through from the UI. I guess there's 2 ways. You can either unminify the production code and step through it that way, which is 200 and some odd thousand lines in one file, and it's very slow in the browser. The other way would be to run, if you're on-prem, to have the source code, which you do have access to from downloading off of your server, because JavaScript is uncompiled, and running that in something like Visual Studio and attaching a remote debugger to it. But neither way is ideal, so we added this functionality in 20.7 under Tools that lets me run in debug mode. So what debug mode is, let me turn on developer tools really quick. So we're going to watch my network. I'm on the network tab. We're going to watch my network console. So we're going to go to extensions, tools, oh, good grief, tools, debug mode. So it's going to refresh my screen and it's going to point to an alternate URL. So that alternate URL is every JavaScript, JSON, HTML file, unminified, unmerged into that single app.min.js file individually. So there's about 2,000 of these, I believe. We'll get a full count here. This is going to be slow. We must have shrunk. Oh, I'm only at the main screen, so this will keep going. So this is going to be slow to load. For me, I'm on a pretty fast internet connection. I was pulling this from the cloud. It took about 30 seconds just to load the UI. That your mileage is going to vary there, but it's having to pull down about 10 meg worth of data in these individual API calls. So this is not for production use to let your users run this way. This would be for debugging mode. But the cool thing here is if I go to like ARIC and I pull a customer up, and let's say I'm working in an extension in this area, I want to be able to set a breakpoint. I can, at this point, go to sources, and from here, I can actually see the source code of our application. Now, I do have to find the right tab, which is this one. Notice how my screen turns blue. And then SX.e1, and then this is the actual UI code that's running. So as I scroll down, as I go down through here, we're going to go into app and modules, and I got to walk my way down all the way into AR, ARIC, and then finally I'm in the code, and I can set breakpoints. And if I were to whatever function I was in, I think it's actually the load screen, we'll set another breakpoint there. We'll close our screen. We'll go back to ARIC, and we'll see if it sets the breakpoint. Obviously, I put it in some place where it doesn't exist. With limited time, yeah. But again, the idea here is you can actually set breakpoints, and you can see the code as it walks through. So it does truly act like a true IDE. We've also added, as I mentioned, for colorization in ARSC, for example, we have an extension on this screen, new extension capabilities that allows us to edit more, that allows us to set colors based upon conditions as well. So here we have, I can just set the field color to, let's say, orange, but I also could do multiple colors, and I can add these, and these conditions are Boolean. So 1 = 1 true, 1 = 2 false, through that process. I do want to, just before I close, if you go to community.infor.com, we have a group, Cloud Suite Distribution. If I'm logged in, it is Cloud Suite Distribution SX.e, and we post videos out here for any new extension capabilities that we add. Your peers ask questions and answer, provide feedback here as well. So if you have not been out here before, please do. It's a great place to learn how what we add for extensibility and the capabilities of it. So with that, Mel, I know I ran a minute long. If there was any questions that came in.
Yeah, so we have a couple here. Is there a way to visually see changes to a screen when an extension is applied?
Yeah, actually, that's actually a really cool one. So I showed you the diff between the two when we were actually looking at code. If we are in the developer WYSIWYG screen, I can go to more tools and go to highlight changes. And this will actually now highlight new fields that have been added are going to be green, and orange are going to be fields that have been rearranged. So lookup field would normally be on top because these new fields don't exist. If I remove a field, obviously it is going to just be gone. So I won't be able to see that's changed, but if I can come down here to deleted controls, now I can see that email's been removed, and I can restore that field, and it pops it right back.
Great, thank you. We do have one more. How do I learn how to code extensions?
So I would recommend Google is your friend. So we use Angular JS, and there is a really good tutorial site, tutorialspoint.com. So for me, it's the third hit that comes up if I type Angular JS tutorial. That'll give you the base framework on understanding how to write JavaScript and Angular JS. Ron Stevens is an excellent resource from Infor to give more training that relates on doing extensions from our user interface perspective. So we do have some variants in the way that we take advantage of Angular JS, but having this this foundation is really key. And I do know those that have gone through this and watched the videos that we have posted out on the site and have really done some amazing things with extensions.
Very cool. And we will have a recording of the webinar posted on the TUG forum tomorrow, in case you want to see more or rewatch this then. And again, we are taking questions after each presenter, so please go ahead and enter those questions as you have them. Here we go, we had another one come in. Do you have standard Infor styling to ensure the interface continues to look professional?
Right, so we use the hook and loop designed controls, and they were actually open sourced a little while ago, I believe about a year ago. So if you want to create your own websites or applications that style and look like Cloud Suite distribution SX.e, you can go to design.infor.com and access our components. So these are all, now when you're doing extensibility, you don't necessarily need this, but if you want to write your own application, we open source this. So yes, from Cloud Suite distribution, if you look at the HTML that actually generates this this screen for Cloud Suite distribution, we use a common styling in this product, and we update it so that we have a consistent view and styling as the releases increment.
Thank you so much, Chris. And I think now we'll go ahead and pass the screen over to our next presenter, David Garcia, the application supervisor at First Supply. He's also our very own TUG SX Technical Network Group Leader. Go ahead and pass over the screen to you, David.
Just watching for the button to appear. There it is. Show my screen. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So hello, everybody. So my topic, I'm focusing on some recommended practices in terms of from a user and developer standpoint of working on extensions. I'm the application supervisor at First Supply. I've got about 20 years of experience developing in progress, and in our environment, we're now on 11.20.4. We've been updating our WebUI environment 2 to 3 times a year since we went live on-prem with WebUI in 2018. So each year we are trying to make sure that we can keep track of all the extensions that we have in place and make sure they're well documented and understood for each of those updates. My first thing, welcome to development. If you haven't been developing, it's a new world with WebUI. Two primary topics I want to focus on and areas are the pre-development documentation and development practices. I bring up pre-development documentation because with pre-development documentation, it's not just about just everybody wants to get into the cool tools that Chris was just demonstrating in the latest version, but I always have to recommend that you take a moment to think about your approach and work on your design documents and plan out each of the extensions that you're planning to do. And with our documentation that we establish prior to actually working on any extension is the fact that we have created a master list of our extensions. This master list, it to me is probably one of the most important things, especially when you're looking to be able to move to later versions. It contains several key pieces of information. It contains a summary of what each extension purposes. We create functional description documents for each extension that describe how it's supposed to function, as well as some screenshots. We also include two other features in our list: a unique extension ID that every company can decide on how they're going to number them, but you want to have an ID, as well as the status of where is it? Is it in the testing environment? Is it in testing with users, or have we released it to production? In our environment, we went pretty straightforward and decided to use SharePoint as our source of our repository for establishing that documentation. Here's a screenshot of our SharePoint list, where we just have some titles, some extended descriptions, and a few other pieces of information that we capture so that we can keep track of all of our extensions. Notice the second column as well. We have that our extension ID. We use a 4-digit number with EL at the front. In our documentation, we just use Word documents that get attached to each one of those extensions in SharePoint, and it gives a functional description as well as screenshots that make it easily identifiable within the interface what has been changed. These come in particularly handy when we have users doing if they're doing manual regression testing, as well as we are doing additional enhancements down the road, if we need that as a reference material. So once you actually get to development stage, I have to emphasize this as much as I can. Always develop in a test system or a test environment. When you think it's the easiest thing to do and, oh, I'll just make that little tweak in production, not a good idea. In regards to the all of those settings, like the EL numbering scheme that we use, information such as that comes in really handy once you're trying to actually find those extensions in the extension administration screen, SAAEA. As you can see in my screenshot here, we have some items that have been modified using, in the highlighted one case, 6 different extensions have been added to that user interface. If we are trying to find all of the programs, whether it's JavaScript, whether it's a Vue or otherwise, having that number makes it really easy for us to find all of the related pieces of code that were affected. Using those tags, you definitely want to make sure that you are adding those to the tags in the SAAEA interface, as well as adding that description into the SAAEA for giving a summary of what your extensions are doing. When we get to actually developing within the code, my recommendations is that you want, if you haven't already established them, make sure you have some naming conventions that are documented for your developers to reference for variables, functions, controllers. In our instance, like in JavaScript, we either use a convention where we have it prefixed with FS. We also have instances where we use a ZZ in front of our variables or in front of our functions. The importance of making sure these are unique. We are trying to make sure that we don't run into conflicts with Infor developing new functions or putting in new variables. We want to make sure that we aren't inadvertently overwriting something that shows up down the way. It also makes maintenance and a quick identification if you are modifying a extension within the extended view, that it makes it pretty quickly apparent that, hey, that is a custom function or custom variable that is populating a screen. My 2 last items that I want to make sure that I mentioned is that I strongly recommend having code reviews, having a second set of eyes to review some of your coding changes. Always, you'll find that it reveals challenges or problems in your code that the first coder didn't actually recognize, or more efficient ways of writing code. It just overall enhances the code. And my last point is scheduled deployments. We do a similar release schedule to how Infor releases its updates. We have a release schedule of once a month where all of our extensions go out to the public, in which we announce them via an email prior to that weekend to let them know, hey, here's the new functionalities that we are deploying as extensions, and so that we aren't carpet bombing everybody in the company with emails every so often with, hey, there's this new extension here and this new extension there. So those are my recommendations. If you would have further questions about how we are approaching it, here's my email address. And
thank you,
it.
David. We do have a few questions here in the question bank. We have one that says, how do you document any later modifications, tweaks, fixes to extensions? Do you maintain prior versions when you modify existing extensions?
So I believe that, so if I'm understanding the question right, it's kind of determining what your threshold is between, are you modifying a previous extension, or do you consider it a update to a previous extension, or are you considering it a completely different one? For the most part, we do treat our extensions as separate and distinct if it's different functionality. For example, if you added a field and a button to a screen, and then they wanted that button not only to do one thing, but a new thing, I could see where we would enhance that existing extension to increase that functionality, versus if you're adding brand new fields that are completely separate, that I would qualify as a separate and distinct extension. I look at it from what is promotable. If you have a change that is completely separate from another change, I could even potentially break those out as separate extensions in our numbering scheme.
Makes perfect sense. Also, you mentioned that you have scheduled deployments. How do you distribute those changes to users? Is it via email or on a website? Do you use Mingle?
So currently, when we do a release, we do an email summary of the list of all the extensions and enhancements that we're implementing. That goes out a few days beforehand. We do have links to the Word documents that have the described functionality as well. That goes back to the SharePoint site. So as they are looking to dive into understand what additional functionalities are being rolled out, that's their primary source.
Very good. All right, well, thank you so much, David. And I think it's time to pass the screen over to our next presenter, the brilliant Jeffrey Brown, the Director of Development at Infor. Let me make you presenter.
Yes.
There you go.
Let me show my screen and I will start my presentation. Okay, is that good?
You can see it.
Okay, perfect. And thank you for that, David. And you know, to jump right in from what David was saying about, you know, making sure that you have the peer reviews and making sure you schedule it. The other thing that I would do as a make sure is that you've thoroughly tested your extensions, and that's where this kind of part sort of comes into play. So testing as a service is a multi-tenant offering that we have from Infor. It's a test automation platform that we have as part of the Infor suite of products. So to kind of get your mind about, you know, thinking about this, you know, why, if I kind of ask customers, you know, why spend time and money on manually testing your UI extensions when it can simply be automated? And that's really the goal of TAS, is to allow you to, you know, test all the extensions and make sure you're getting a reliable set of tests. If we talk about some of the challenges about the UI extensions, if you're Cloud Suite, or as David said, you're taking them, a monthly maintenance update, making sure that you're testing everything that you need to do. David's team does not have a small list of extensions, so making sure that they can test all those things within the right amount of time and address anything if they need to. If you're Cloud Suite, again, you're getting those updates. So you want to make sure that you're testing those quick enough. The other thing is getting repeatable results. When it comes to automated testing, one of the biggest benefits is knowing that you are going to get predictable and reliable results. With manual testing, it's one thing to say, okay, we're going to go test things, but you have to remember what you test and remember how you tested it. With automation, that problem kind of goes away. Testing before your customers find the problem. So you want to make sure that you've tested and validated before you ship it out to your users or whomever you've got, to make sure that you've tested things well before they did. And then, as David said, creating this master list of extensions is a critical part of this. Knowing what you have, knowing your library, understanding the scenarios, understanding how they're supposed to work is really an important part. So these are some of the challenges. So testing as a service can help with all of these. Really, we've got three major components of the product. We've got our test case designer, which allows you to store test cases, validate and document the extension features. Those scenarios that David talked about, of making sure you have all those scenarios documented well. Testing as a service allows you to do that. The workflow designer piece is the record and playback, and then execution planning allows you, once you have those workflows scheduled, as part of that scheduled deployment that David was talking about. So there's a lot of automation tools in the industry, but we took kind of a very unique approach to the tool set here. We've got a very simple record and playback process. So all you do is you open up the browser, log into your application, hit record, and use the software. Just by the nature of using your software the way you intended, it will record those scenarios and even help you create those documentation flows. So where David was saying you want to make sure all the scenarios have been validated and documented, TAS can help you with that. It can simply record those and build the documentation for you. We present the test automation, unlike most tools in the industry, which are very syntax based, which obviously if you're dealing with extensions and stuff, you're going to understand syntax. But I want you to be focusing on building your extensions and creating new functionality for your teams. You shouldn't be spending as much time building scripts in the automation side. So we've built a very clear, efficient tool that allows you to do that and present it in a very storyboard kind of look. And we've gotten ourselves into the mind of the ERP user, because the users are used to filling out a form, clicking next, fill out a form, click done. We've presented the information in ways that make sense to ERP systems, following what Chris said with the hook and loop controls, those design patterns. So it looks like, and it's a very familiar app. So that really reduces the learning curve of a tool like this. So what we say with it, Taz, is it's got a near zero learning curve. So you can really literally be up and running on it within minutes to hours. It doesn't take long at all. So how does this fit into your process? Again, going back to kind of what David said, you've had you've identified your extension, you've got your master list of extensions, you know what they are, you know what all the scenarios that need to be tested. Now TAS can take over. You simply go in, use the application, it can record those documents so you have a clear set of documentation for all those tests. That moves over to the workflow designer, which allows you to take those step-by-steps and turn them into a repeatable automation flow, one that you could run over and over again. You can simply do the record and playback to test them out, make sure they're all working. The system supports things like peer reviews even at the testing level. Then you can check those in, schedule them as part of your maintenance window or as part of your deployment process. So as soon as the system's back online, or even before if you're testing in a dev environment. So you can do both testing before or after deployment. You can run through all those scenarios and then you get an email results of here's everything that worked. So that way, with the bigger, as your library of tests or extensions grows, you can continue to add to your test library, and as soon as you run them, you're going to get immediate results that says, okay, this one's the reason that this one failed. Let's go take a look at that one. Instead of you having to analyze every single one, it can help you narrow that in. So very helpful from that point of view. So what are some of the key benefits of TAS itself? Again, there's a lot of automation tools out there. Testing as a service is used by Infor. It's probably the biggest thing. So we use this to test all of our application teams, all of our applications before release. Like Chris Weaver's team uses TAS to validate the CSD application before they ship the release. Codeless Automation. Again, other tools out there, you may be familiar with tools like Selenium and stuff, but you have to take the time to learn the syntax and then get them to work. And they're not designed as a full platform. This allows you a full end-to-end platform for your testing. Making sure that you have those reliable results. This is just kind of a key of automation itself, which is one of the reasons why you would want to do automation. Decreasing the testing time. So here I put over 95%, but really it's a massive time saver. If you were to take all of your scenarios and have human users go in and test it, not only are you not getting as reliable testing, but you're certainly not going to be able to do the same number of tests in the same amount of time as you can do it through automation. This does two things. Not only does it decrease the window that you need to do for your tests, but it also allows you to improve your test coverage library by testing many more scenarios through that automation. And TAS itself is compatible with multi-tenant and on-prem as long as it's a web-based application, which aligns well with the extensions that we're talking about today. The tool itself is written as a JavaScript component, so it almost runs as an extension itself. That's kind of from a technical level. So can TAS help you? If you need to quickly document your extensions to create that master list, if you've got UI extensions that you need to test, if you're running Cloud Suite or on-prem applications and just need to test the application, we can help with that. And then TAS also works with third-party applications. So if you have any of these needs, we can reach out. My email address is on the screen. Contact me. I can set up a demo with you and your team, and we can talk more about how TAS can help you. So Mel, back over to you. What do we have for questions?
All right, thanks, Jeffrey. We do have a question. It says the big question for TAS pricing, which I'm guessing would be individual per company. How would up to you how to answer that one?
Yeah. I mean, as with any of the Infor products, different customers are in different levels. They're entitled to different discounting and all those things. So the best thing to do is let's set up a demo, work with your sales rep, and we can get you guys a price specific for your company. That's the best way to go about answering that.
Okay. So if testing as a service is a multi-tenant cloud platform, can it connect to an application running on-prem?
Yeah, so this is one we get quite a bit. It does. So TAS, when you get TAS or you sign up for it, just like any provisioned Cloud Suite application, we will provision your tenant into Mingle, and then you can log in and start using the tool. When you go to run a test, you can run them through an agent, a pool of agents that we have that can scale up and run hundreds of tests at the same time. But the question is how do we connect that? So we've got a couple different technical ways that we can do that. We do have customers running TAS from the cloud connecting to and testing on-prem application, so we can help you solve that. Just know that it is, for the short answer here, based on time, is we can solve that problem.
Very good, and we have one more. Can we run the same test in multiple environments?
Yeah, so like David said, it's really code and make sure you're developing in your test environment or development environment. So you might be building the tests in a development environment, and then you can absolutely take the test that you're developing, the testing as a service test, develop it in development, and then run it in the multiple environments. So you may have one or more test environments. You could just change the URL and point it over. Now there is data issues you need to consider. So like if you're using dev user 1 as a login in your dev environment, that user would have to exist in the second one. But we even have ways that can help manage that when you have different data profiles and environments still running the same tests. So the short answer is yes, we can help with that as well.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, Jeffrey. And I think that it's time to go ahead and pass the screen over to our last presenter. Last but not least, the talented Jim Hatch, a senior tech at Tridex Systems. Go ahead and make you presenter, Jim.
Okay, my screen should be coming up. Thank you very much. Nice to present. I'm unmuted, right? And my screen's up. Okay. Let me bring this up before I. Okay. My presentation is also a good segue from David's in terms of his pre-development documentation. We built a tool here at Tridex for managing the information, most of the information David was talking about in a Mongoose application. First of all, I want to apologize for my angled camera. I am working on getting one that can mount on top of my monitor, but for now you're going to have to take an angled view. So here we are in extension administration, and the first thing I want to show you is somewhat unrelated to the meat of what I'm going to show today, but we built this context app that takes, and we've published the tags from SAAEA, and if you, right now it's set to TDX002. If I set it to TDX001, you'll see, no, I'm sorry, you have to drill in. You drill in, and if this works, no, error, great. Oh, that's a great way to start a presentation. Let me try again, see if there's any. So what should happen, and this could be that we had a problem with this particular piece of the context application, and it could be due to a caveat that I did want to mention, and that is we upgraded Mongoose just 2 days ago, and we are finding a few things that have seemed to break, and we're researching them. But the context app, when it works, will bring up based on the tag, the extension that you're looking at, and then you can, well, if that worked, you drill in and you'll see more details, and then you could link directly from here to what we call EJM, Extension Job Management. But luckily, it is available also from here, and it's in the waffle or the app switcher. And so this is an application where and this is a demo environment that we built to show customers what we could potentially do for them. And so we have data in here and so forth. So if I pick one to look at, okay, I can't believe this. Hey, Brandon, can you ping Mark and ask him if he's doing something in here?
You try to refresh your screen and see if a cookie gets rid of that.
Okay, I apologize. I'm just going to log out and back in and see if maybe I should close the browser.
While we're waiting on that, Jim, we do have a question if you want to answer that. At a high level, what's Mongoose?
Brandon, can you take that? It is a development tool, an Infor development tool that's used to build applications. And Brandon may be able to add on to that, and Chris Weaver may be able to add on to that.
They kind of have 3 levels with the Mongoose, app builder, and then another level that allows you to do home pages or contextual applications, as well as a full-blown application development tool that can have a back-end database to interact with the screen and keep track of the data throughout the screen. There's actually quite a number of Infor applications that have been built using the Mongoose, with Cloud Suite Field Service being one, and I believe they're working on CRM as well being built out fully in Mongoose as a full application.
PJM as well.
Okay. Thank you, Brandon.
Just going to try this again.
I do have a.
Yep. See, it
Just
seemed
take a minute, Jim.
seemed to work. I don't know what went wrong.
Okay.
So, okay. Take two. You'll see that if I click into a different one, right now it's set to TDX 002. If I go to TDX 001, it changes automatically, and then I can see high-level stuff there. This link is something that has broken, and we're trying to find out why. But as I said, we should be able to get there from here. Okay, just going to do a search. That's not the one I want to look at. It defaults to the first one. So I'm going to scroll down and show you the data that we're collecting in here. So we're capturing the customer name, and that could be, if you're using an application like this internally, it may be accounts payable, it may be a particular person in your organization. You know, this is generally configurable. A short name and description of the extension. The customer contact, again, could be an internal person. And then what's labeled here is the Tridex contact name might be the developer or the person that reviews the design request. We do have a revision, but we do not have revisioning tools. It would be something you'd use. And here is where we keep the unique identifier that David highly recommended, and I agree with him. We also like to track the time that we would spend on a development project, as well as some key dates. And we also have a status where it can be quoted, signed off, started, completed, and on to delivered. And these again are configurable. It could be, you know, received, designed, completed, in test, whatever the case may be. And with each of these, we have a requirements section, solutions, assumptions, setup, and notes. Currently, this application will only allow us to attach JPEG images. We are working, you can see documents we're working on developing so you could attach Word files. But in the solutions section, you might see the actual views that were changed, or the name of the extension artifact, and a description of what it's doing. And you can make it bigger and see it all. And then you might have an assumption section where you assume that the customer doesn't have any existing extensions, and that's an important thing, because if you're developing in an area that's already been extended, you need to start from that code. You don't want to develop separate and then try to integrate. And then another one, the user one isn't already being used, setup. And I like this section because, you know, although these steps are simple, if you had to redeploy this to another system, or maybe to another company because you're only using it in certain companies, you have the steps that were taken to deploy it, so that, you know, 18 months down the road when you need to deploy it, you know the exact steps to be taken. And then you can have notes, and I just have the testing was completed on the 15th. We also have the ability to edit these, and I was going to use notes as an example of, we can add a new note, and I'm just going to say notes TUG. what is it, 7/7/20. Submit. So there you go back. So that's about all I had to show today. The takeaway that I hope you're getting is that you can build an application in Mingle, which is part of Infor OS, and deploy it in your environment, have it available through the waffle menu or the app switcher, and as well as integrate it through a context app into WebUI.
And Jim, if anyone has any questions later, how would they get a hold of you?
They can email jimh@tridexsys.com.
Okay. And we do have a few questions. We're almost out of time, but we do have a couple here. Where can we get training on Mongoose?
I would recommend Campus or...
We actually created a new Mongoose development site. I believe it's mongoose.infor.com. And that site has a lot of videos and references that could be needed in the development of Mongoose. So I would highly recommend to start at that location. There should be some campus videos as well, but most of the videos have been converted to that mongoose.infor.com.
Thank you,
Great.
Brandon.
Okay. And we have another one. How does a customer manage their own extensions alongside Infor or partner created extensions, especially if they touch the same area? Good question.
Well, that is a very, very good question. We develop extensions for lots of people, and some of them have had Infor do extensions as well. And as I mentioned previously, part of our, well, you need to get any existing code that you're going to need to touch from the customer. The code is not compiled or encrypted. It's a simple export of the code and can be emailed or FTP'd to either you can, if you want to do an extension on top of Infor's, then you just need to work around what they did in the same controller. And in our case, we would request the code from the customer, and then we would put our extensions, whatever they're asking for, on top of or next to whatever another provider, Infor or someone else, had done. You know, it's one of the things, and I'll mention this, Chris, because I just thought of it. It would be nice if you had a way to freeze an extension file at a customer site, because if it has been either sent to Infor for future development or to someone like Tridex, then it should be locked so that no one goes in and makes a tweak, because we've had that happen where a customer sends us the code, we do all of our work, we send it back, and they go, well, that's great, but all that stuff we did while you had the code is gone. And then we have a recovery operation. So it's generally manual is how you have to manage that.
Yeah, and I would add just a little bit to that, Jim, for that
Absolutely.
question about, you know, if you want to, you know, add your own extensions on top of what you know, either Tridex as a partner delivers or Infor delivers from ICS, use comments and, you know, tag your code above and below. And, you know, as Jim mentioned, we don't have a way to lock the code, and I you know, it's up to the owner, the development owner at the customer site to manage SAAEA and ensure that, you know, if a partner or Infor is doing work on an extension, that you know, no changes are being made, you know, in that, or that they're made in relation or in conjunction with the other third party that's doing that development work. But I like to see tags, and I'm not sharing my screen right now, but if you have JavaScript, Jim, click on that second one, you know, add add JavaScript tags, and there's different flavors of it, just 2 backslashes or forward slashes, excuse me, and just put in, as David was talking about, having those tags. Create your own tag, and that tag can be a supplement to what the master tag is, and just so you can identify what's your code inside of other code that someone else has delivered to you. And that's also helpful if you have 2 developers working in the same area. Let's say you're both working in the order entry advanced line screen, and one's adding fields, one's changing functionality, let's say the way the rebate's being calculated. You're going to work in the same file in many cases. You want to be able to tag your work differently, so you can separate those projects out and identify who's done what.
Yeah, and Chris, this is Jeffrey. Just to add to that, maybe there's not a way to lock it, but certainly with the feature you guys have added with the revert and the diff, the recovery mechanism is simple as pulling up the other one, reverting, or copying and pasting the code across. So the tools are there to help you with that.
Right. Yeah, and just to be clear, we have the revision control, but it's not a full-blown code repository. So, buyer beware with that one. I still do recommend, if you're going to do development work, have Git or SVN or some type of code repository to check that stuff into as artifacts. We added the revision control for, just like Jeffrey said, so you can do quick diffs. If you made a mistake, they put it in. Everybody kids around, they put it in for me because I'm always making mistakes and breaking things. So we needed a way to roll back what Chris did, and that's where that revision control came from. It's not full blown repository level functionality.
So
Okay, so we did.
If we have one more minute, one thing that I do is, and this is similar. I developed code and designed custom code while working for Infor, and so I adopted their the way many of the coders do. For each change you make, you add a header saying what you did, and it's associated with one of those, either your tag or it's your first change. And then in the code, you'd put a comment SIO1 beginning at the beginning of what you add, and then SIO1 end at the end of what you add. And sometimes it's even good to say, if you're going to remove something out, you comment it out and say, I took it out because of this change. And that way, if someone comes back and says, I need to pull this functionality, I don't want it anymore, and it's mixed in with all sorts of other code, you can more easily pull out what you want to get out. It's well marked. Thank you. Sorry to run over.
All right, we do have go ahead, David.
I was just going to say, from our standpoint, if we were to say have Tridex work on something, we'd tag in that tags field at the top of the screen something like a TDX WIP for every single extension related to what they're working on, so that right there in the search and in the grid, it tells us which extensions they are touching so that we know to leave them alone. And I imagine Brandon and his team would be helping to coordinate if they have new ones to check out, they'd let us know which ones and we'd tag those as well.
Correct. Good idea.
Perfect. Well, we do have several more questions, but I think we're out of time. Just a quick reminder, a recording of the webinar will be posted on the TUG forums tomorrow in case you missed anything or want to rehash it. Before passing the torch over to Gloria, though, I would like to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for joining us today, and especially each panelist for taking time out of your day to share your knowledge with the rest of us. So thank you so much. And Gloria, I will pass it back to you.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. I wanted to just say thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. And for those of you who are looking forward to more meaty content, we will be having our next webinar this coming Friday on July 10th. Make sure you look at the content, register ahead of time. And in the meantime, I'd just like to say thank you once again. And as they say in Hollywood, that's a wrap. Bye now and have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.